Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pure Presence Live, the book club of the study of the nature of consciousness with your host, Bill Free, and my co-host for this show, Jenny Beal. Welcome, Jenny, back to our show, and Happy New Year.
Lovely to be with you, Bill, and to be with everyone that's online.
Thank you. Yes, we have a slow startup. Actually, what happens is it looks like the room populates as we are as we go along, and it has a little bit of a delay factor. So we'll watch the number of people jump in a minute. It jumps about every 5 seconds. It increases the population, and we also have people that are here on the call-in feature. And thank you guys that are here for the call-in feature. It looks like it's working just perfectly. We sound checked it with Diane Clark a few minutes ago, and thank you for helping us with that. And we have about 100 new people on the call that have registered for the book club for the second half. I think the book club goes to sometime from now until sometime in March for this book for the rest of the nature of consciousness. And I look forward to getting back into this material with all of you. And I want to welcome all of you new guys that have registered just in the last 30 days. Like I said, there was about 100 of you that have registered just in the month of December. And welcome all of the ones, you guys that are coming back from the first 8 chapters that we did. And that was just a great study to be involved in. And I'm really happy the way we ended in November on chapter 8, because in my mind, this chapter 9, sort of summarizes the rich content that Rupert delivers to us in chapter 9. And the chapter 9 is called The Outward Facing Path, and collapsing the distinction between consciousness and objects. And I'm not going to pretend to know near what my host knows, because she is such a veteran of this material and also of Rupert. And Jenny, I love that you are such a devoted follower of not just Rupert and the amazing way that he presents these ideas and this content, and he delivers you to the experience, but also you have experience in the teachers that taught Rupert. And I just want, in behalf of everyone here that's watching and listening, I want to give a warm welcome to Jenny Beal. Welcome to the show, Jenny, and the mic is all yours.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
I'd like to start. Can you hear an echo actually in my voice? I can hear a bit of an echo.
No, I'm
nice and clear. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Rupert starts this chapter with a description of the 3 stages of the spiritual path, and the first 2 stages are really what we've covered in those previous chapters 1 to 8. So the first step really was using the neti approach to distinguish our essential nature of pure consciousness from all of the objects of consciousness, everything that we're aware of. So in a sense, that first stage was turning away from objects of experience. And I remember you covered that with Kimberly, and I remember Kimberly explaining that very nicely.
Yes.
The second step was is really much more about abiding as that pure consciousness that we've discovered ourselves to be, and getting to know the nature of that consciousness, just the fact that it can never be disturbed, that it's unlimited. It's unlimited in time, and it's unlimited in space, and that understanding brings us to the point of knowing I am the witnessing presence of consciousness. I, consciousness, am the witness of mind, body, and world. And that's really the starting point. And I think that's why he included a description of those first two steps in this chapter, because that's really the starting point for the outward facing path. And that's what this chapter is all about. So turning back towards the objects of experience to understand what their true nature is, and to see that there's no distinction between consciousness and the objects of consciousness.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what the chapter's about, really.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Yes. And the thing the highlights, and I, this is very interesting for me as a Course in Miracles teacher and student to have uh, have a presentation, have ideas and content the way it's described by Rupert, for me to really take the ideas into a direct experience of what the ideas are presenting.
yes.
And for me at first it's always been pretty easy for me to neti. That's always been fairly simple and straightforward. Neti. I'm not this. I'm not that. And awareness is the observer is aware without commentary or even labeling. It can be aware of objective experience without actually connecting as it actually can pull back and be the awareness of it that's always present, whether that is happening or not. And that was always fairly simple for me. It's the it's the collapsing or the outward facing, and also the inner experience has always been fairly straightforward, because when you close your eyes, you're still having the experience of what you are, of your essential self. When you open your eyes, the essential self is now, it can be quietly or gently in the background and not really really merge with objective experience unless you decide to, unless you make that your choice, your decision to go into the objective experience. And then learning how to pull back as the observer of the objective experience. And so the neti was straightforward for me. The inner place is where I spend my time in meditation, in just that quiet presence and just being, and how wonderful that is when you're not trying to get somewhere, when you're not trying to have an experience, but just be the experience or be the being of awareness that is aware of the experience, that inner place. And now going back, the collapsing the distinction between consciousness and objects, that is the more subtle, more difficult experience for me to connect with, so that I have all three all the time, right?
I think it is for everyone, and I think that's why he leaves it till last. So it's the third and last and last step. But he
Yeah.
divides that step, or also the step we're considering now, into three separate parts. So we start start from where we left off at the end of step 2, which is I am pure consciousness, the separate witness of experience, that to which all experience appears. And then in the next step of this outward facing path, we start to say, well, is it experience appearing to me, or is it experience appearing in me? And if we really think about it, then obviously our thoughts appear in me, in consciousness. Our perceptions, seeing and hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, appear in consciousness. Our feelings appear in consciousness. So it really makes more sense to say that well, consciousness is that sort of empty space-like presence in which everything we know appears. It all appears in consciousness. And he gives the analogy of clouds floating in the sky. And so that's the next step. And then the last step of this outward facing path is to say, well, what are all of those clouds really made of? What's their nature? And he changes his metaphor to a self-aware screen at this point, and he says, well, really, there's nothing to seeing other than the knowing of it. There's nothing to hearing other than the knowing of it. And really, it's like a self-aware screen, because all there is to the screen is all there is to the images that appear on the screen is the screen itself. It just modulates itself in the form of those images. So we see there's nothing to any of our sensations or perceptions or thoughts or feelings other than consciousness itself. And that's really, it's that last step that I found that people have the most problem with, and I certainly had the most problem with, because I thought of seeing and hearing and touching as being three separate things, almost like sort of three separate channels. But when you really look at them, when you really examine them, you can't find separate spaces in which those three realms of experience occur. They all occur in that same one space. They're all made out of the same stuff. And I thought about it in the sense of a dream. When we dream something at night, then we don't imagine that there's something outside of that dream which is coming into it. We know that everything that appears in that dream is made out of consciousness, and it's really the same in the waking state.
Yes, yes. That's I like the way you describe that, Jenny. It's the experience that it seems like the experience that I want, or I am trying to avoid, and I'm carefully I'm not really wanting to use the word try, except that it does seem to take a choice, or it does seem to take a presence of awareness. It does seem to take a cognition of experience to not allow yourself to be pulled into and as the image and make decisions and reactions from there.
Yes, you're absolutely right, and it's the trap that that we all face, isn't it, all the time? It's so easy because we're so accustomed to giving all our attention to objects, that we get lost in the objects of the world. We get lost in the situation, the difficulties in our families, or the problems we face with our car or our house or whatever it is. We get lost in all of that, um, and and forget the reality of that experience. But what Rupert says, um, I think is very encouraging. That it really happens over time. That you get less and less, get drawn out less and less into the objects of experience. You still deal with them, but you deal with them from the point of view of knowing that you are pure awareness and that they are pure awareness too. That everything is just one,
Yes,
and
yes,
it's a process that just takes a while.
yes, yes. And it does, I mean, it does require, it does require that you have an investment in the discovery. It does require that you have, that you put your 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 time or your focus or your value in the discovery, the self discovery process or practice, so that you're not living in hypnosis in the dream world, believing that you're the movie, as Rupert describes it, and not the screen. So it does really, and it's beautiful. What a beautiful experience life is.
It
I'm just
is, yeah.
discovering how beautiful it is to know the truth and to be the truth, and yet not try to fix or change the things that are occurring. It's an interesting sort of a dance, isn't it?
It is. And I think it's love that always pulls you back to standing as awareness, to being what you are. And I think it always will. It's love for the truth.
Yes, yes. Well, we have a few comments. We have Diane Clark is the only one left in the call-in feature. I don't know where everyone else went. Thank you for sticking around, Diane.
I can't see the comments, Bill. I don't know whether I should have clicked something.
Look in the top. There's a little, looks like a notepad that says chat. If you click on chat, it's the second item down on the right, and you can click on chat, and you'll see
Oh
that
yeah,
there
I've
are,
got that now. Jolly good. Yes, thank
yeah,
you.
there's a few comments.
Yes.
Annika from the Netherlands, she says yes, and to leave that last part to life. So she's talking about when you were she wrote that when you were talking about the third part, leave that last part to life, to discover it through the very resting here, the seeing from here, asking the one that knows what something is. Yes, yes, yes. And then she says, I needed an intermedium step to see all of life is. There is being. We are, and being is known. Being is knowing. And Anne, she goes by Anne on the chat, but it's Annika, and she is so clear, as we know from her earlier discussions. Annika is very clear in her understanding, and she writes brilliant statements of truth on the chat board for us. Thank you, Annika, for including that. And she says, "Hello, everyone, and happy now." And uh, so, yeah, I love I love the experience that is shared. You know, Annika is just a witness of my own consciousness. Annika and Jenny is a witness of my own consciousness. And if you guys, whoever is watching, Annika and Jenny and Kimberly and Bill and all of the beings that come on here and speak the truth, and it has this rich, connected yes to it, and it's a witness to the truth of what our knowing of the experience is telling us. And this is an opening of the mind of presence, the mind of God that we are. Yeah.
That's
And
lovely, Bill.
Diana, if you have any questions, you can put your hand up by going *2 on your phone. If you would like to speak, you're welcome to speak. And that's the best part of the call-in feature. If you would like to collaborate in this conversation, and you click on the link that takes you to the call-in feature, you're able to actually come into this experience with your voice, and you're able. I'm happy to click on your name if you decide to do that. And otherwise, I just want to keep. We'll keep going into this chapter of the outward facing path and the collapsing of the distinction. You know, the thing that I really love about this chapter is in the first page of this chapter 9, Rupert says that once consciousness has recognized its own ever-present and unlimited nature, the recognition that is traditionally referred to as enlightenment or awakening. The purpose of distinguishing consciousness from objects has been accomplished, and it is now necessary to dissolve this distinction. Thus, the third step, what that you just described, on the spiritual path involves an exploration of objective experience in the light of our new understanding, in order to collapse the apparent distinction between consciousness and its objects. And so this is almost kind of this is the training ground of, like, okay, now we have understanding. Now we also connect with what Annika was describing in chapter 8, where awareness is aware, and it's awareness is mind at rest, is what she said in chapter 8. And so we're developing the experience of being the mind at rest, and then also in the outward facing path, we're involved in awareness is the mind in motion. And so we have taken the mind back into awareness as an experience, and we're involving ourselves as the mind in motion. Yes?
Yes, absolutely. And what Rupert says is that it is important to discover consciousness at rest, consciousness without objects, in other words, which was what Annika was describing so beautifully in the last webinar. Before you start going on the outward path and looking at objects, because that rest and the peace that you find from that rest in consciousness without objects is always there, even in the midst of activity. And that's really what the outward facing path is about, to find that or not so much to find it, but to recognize it in the midst of activity.
Yes, to recognize it and to be
Yes.
it. And that's where I don't know, it seems like that's where the fun starts. It seems like that where when you know that you know, and you have developed the experience of resting in that abiding place. You can allow yourself, like, you can allow yourself to be the sky. You actually know that to be the truth. You actually have a knowing of it, and it becomes a new a new identity. It becomes a new, almost like an anchor of, okay, I am that. And that's sort of like what the Maharaj was saying when he says, I am that, not that. Nettie would say, not this, I am that. And it's in the knowing of that I am that you anchor yourself to something that is stable, that is this. It's like the movie screen that never changes. It's like the sky that's always present. And then you go and you sort of play with the clouds a little bit. You sort of mingle with the clouds, but you always have this background intimacy of knowing your true identity as the self.
I think that's such an important point, Bill. I'm glad you mentioned it, because you know, we all go through quite difficult circumstances from time to time, but it's knowing that that's there and knowing how to just sink back into it and enjoy it and rest in it, that's so important for us.
Yes, yes. And it's also where your safety lies. It's also where you are able to rest in this place of peace, because there is absolute and total peace in this resting place of awareness. There is, in the Course in Miracles would describe it in these three ways. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And so it really is, and it doesn't mean, because I've had this conversation with Rupert when I didn't fully understand his teaching on the outward facing path. And I was in one of his retreats, and he was describing himself as being very much real. And I said, but you're not real. You're I am definitely real. and, and he gave a very profound teaching on that part of it, because I was coming from a different languaging of of that connected similarity, and my language didn't line up or match with Rupert's language. So
Yes.
in the languaging of that, what that really means is nothing real can be threatened. Awareness is untouchable. It is unequivocal. It cannot be. It's indivisible. It's untouchable, and yet it's also what everything else depends on to be even in existence. So in nothing real can be threatened, it's the indivisible experience of the undiluted, pure presence of awareness. And nothing unreal exists is just speaking about the illusion. It's just speaking about illusory, ephemeral, or temporary, just things that are not, that come and go. And those things that come and go would be nothing unreal exists. It's just that those things come and they go, they happen, and then they're here and they're not here. And then this understanding of this experience, where you can relax into the presence of awareness, or relax into the as the sky, or relax into and as the screen, then herein lies the peace of God. This experience becomes the peace of God that surpasses our understanding.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's why I needed Rupert's teaching to bring me to a fuller experience, actually, of what the Course in Miracles is pointing to. I was lacking the experience of the direct experience, even though I had awareness, and even though I was doing what is called forgiveness uh, practice in the Course in Miracles. I was lacking that knowing of the self. I was lacking the knowing and the of the being that the Course points to, but somehow I get caught up in figuring things out. I get into the concepts of figuring it out, and now I'm in the mind that's that's being
Yeah.
watched, right?
It gets more difficult when you're going outwards towards objects, doesn't it? But um, once you um, once you get used to the idea, and once you it can even be a little bit artificial to start with. It doesn't matter if so. For example, if you're meeting someone, you remember before you go into the room to meet them, this is myself, and you feel it, and you relate it to what you've learnt in this chapter. It somehow that really helps to establish that experience, and then eventually it just becomes more and more natural. He At the last retreat I went on in December, he gave a marvelous explanation of the three aspects of this outward facing path. And the first one is really learning about it in the classroom, and that's really like the chapter of this book, learning from that. The second is the yoga meditations, and that's like the lab. And you said it's like science. You've got the classroom, the lab, and the field. So yoga meditations are like the lab, and then the field is where you go out into everyday life, and you see things in the way that he describes here. Everything is myself, everything is pure consciousness, and you relate to it in that way. And you don't have to use those words, you can find your own words. And he gives all sorts of alternative words, like the Sufi saying, which I really love, um, wherever the eye falls is the face of God. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So everything you touch, everything you look at, everything you hear, is God's infinite being. Um, and that's something that you can do almost a little bit like practice, a little bit artificial to start with, but it becomes natural.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure. I had a little bit of this discussion with Rupert in the retreat that I was with him in Garrison last year. I think it was October of 2017, and we touched on this topic a little bit, which was the the experience of the direct path, where where one finds the direct experience of, which is very simple. Rupert brings everyone into the direct experience as soon as he opens his mouth in the first 30 minutes, when he invites you to discover what is it that is aware of this experience, or are you aware? And he takes you right into the direct experience of the being, of the self that you are, of consciousness that is in is it stops the mind, and consciousness is noticing right there. Now you can have that direct experience, and you can have that momentary glimpse of presence, of eternity, of the now presence, and then you get drawn back into the clouds thinking that you're the illusion, that you're the person, that you're the personal self identity, and it's filled with conditioned beliefs about what you are as a body, as a person, as a male, female, different color, different role in your life, mother, father, child, sister, whatever. You have all those beliefs that are filled with grievances, with projections, with judgments. And I, I'm not sure what this practice, this direct path practice, uses directly or calls forgiveness. Can you describe what the what this practice would have similar to forgiveness? Um, share with.
Yes, we don't really have the term forgiveness so much in the direct path. I think I have heard Rupert use it once or twice. It's it's much more the recognition that everyone is myself. Um, there's no separation between me and you, between me and anyone else, between me and animals, between me and the earth. There's no separation, and it's the recognition of that, because as a consequence of that recognition, there can never be any judgment, any bad feeling, any wish for revenge, or or whatever. There just can't.
Well, how do
So
I? But
it's
I have
tackled
it.
from that way.
So I have it. So I'm pissed off at somebody, or I'm angry because I got a bill that is higher, twice as much as it's supposed to be, or I'm scared, fearful because I can't pay my taxes. What do I do? How
You,
do
you
I? What do I do in those in any of?
yes. There are several methods, but one which I find works quite well is who asking who is it that is angry? What is this I that seems to be angry? Surely it's just an ephemeral thought. It's going to pass in moments. It's not myself. How can I be angry? How can I, infinite consciousness, be angry? It makes no sense whatsoever. Um, and then
You're saying
it sort of dissolves.
right,
It dissolves it.
yes. So
The
I
main
have
thing is not to judge the other person, not to even pay that too much attention. Sometimes it's necessary to act very quickly if someone's behaving badly towards someone else, or especially towards a child or an animal who can't defend themselves. Then you might have to act.
yes.
But normally you just let the other person do their own thing, but just the recognition that they are myself will sometimes, and just looking at them in that way will in that moment change their behavior.
Yes, yes. That actually that did answer my question. It's not really a question that I personally have, but it is a question that many have. And
Yes, of course.
I've had this question in an interview with Muji, and I asked, and I realized when I was talking to Muji that the self inquiry, which is what you just did, you said, what is it that's angry, or what is it that is having this problem? And when you do the self inquiry, what is it? So you're really watching or noticing the mind from the place of awareness, and in that practice is the direct path form of forgiveness, because it's bringing the illusion into the light of awareness. And when the illusion comes into the light of awareness, awareness knows that it doesn't need to do anything. Awareness just is. So awareness is the light of truth, and anything that is not light is just, it's just nothing. It's the nothingness of nothing, because the light is all there is by definition. Light dissolves anything that's not light. Anything that's not light becomes light.
Yes.
And in another way, and I saw that Geert says that forgiveness is for the person, there is no person. That is very, very true, because the
Yes.
Course's form of forgiveness says this: forgiveness recognizes what I thought my brother did never occurred. Or forgiveness recognizes what I thought I did never occurred. So forgiveness in terms of A Course in Miracles is completely different from the forgiveness of the world, and it's completely different from the old traditional type of use of forgiveness. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I really do feel, and I've heard Rupert say that we, on the direct path, you still have to go through the purification. You still have to come, and what I mean by that, you have to let go, or allow the dissolving of the conditioned beliefs, the conditioned finite self beliefs, to lose um, their 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 hold, or their connection to
Yes.
the identity, or believing, or the experience of uh, being the screen, or the cloud. The clouds are not really I like in this chapter, he talks all about the clouds, and he does it so brilliantly. And there was one place I wanted to see I can if I can come across it, and he talks about the clouds being just so. He just states it so well in this last part. He says, um, let's see, where did that go? Here it is. He says, the finite mind. It's on page 90. He says the finite mind, separate self or ego, is the agency through which and as which consciousness simultaneously assumes the form of and knows manifestation, just as a movie could be said to be the activity through and as which a screen appears in the form of a landscape. However, just as the screen modulates itself in the form of the movie, but never ceases to be the screen, so consciousness never actually becomes the finite, separate self or ego. And he says the same thing about the clouds in a couple of paragraphs earlier, where even though the clouds appear in the sky, they are never the sky, but
Yes.
they're never not the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Um, it really goes back to what you said earlier um, about um, really always having that place of peace to go back to,
Yes.
so that the sky, you know, the blue sky is always there. The peace is always there in the background. But there was a sentence in relation to what you were saying earlier about purification. There was a sentence I really wanted to read because I think it's so important.
Oh, good.
And
Please do that.
he says it's on bottom of page 91, beginning of 92. This recognition brings enlightened understanding into the realm of our activities and relationships. It is the fruit of enlightenment, in which the peace, happiness, freedom, and love that are inherent in consciousness's knowing of its own infinite being gradually infiltrate, permeate, and saturate all realms of objective experience, thereby progressively colonizing and outshining it in the light of pure knowing. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yes. Yes, it is. And um, it brings you into, instead of having steps, instead of thinking that you need to forgive this and forgive that, and you in the knowing of the experience, in the how did he just say that?
He,
What?
it's progressively colonizing and outshining it in the light of pure knowing.
Yeah.
So it's really just going back all the time to that light of pure knowing. The very first retreat I went to of Rupert some years ago now, and at the end of it, I'd I discussed all of these steps, and I had long discussions with him, lots of questions. Right at the end, I said, what should I do now?" And this is what he said, which is something that's always remained with me. Just allow God's infinite being to shine more and more brightly in your life, and to infiltrate your thoughts, your feelings, your activities, your friendships, your perceptions. That's all. And he made it clear that that is all we need to do.
Yes.
And that that advice was so important
Yeah.
for me, and that really helped.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very important, and it is very direct.
Yeah.
When your peace is disturbed in any way, when you have this understanding, you can go into the experience of being. You can go into the experience of awareness, or as in the knowing of experience, and you can rest right there.
Yes.
It's the quiet presence of being, and you don't need to touch a thing. You don't need to figure anything out from there. You don't need to uh, have a mantra. You don't need to uh, uh, let something go. You don't need to do anything when you abide and reside and rest in the knowing of experience. That, in my mind, is like the sun shining on the puddle of water.
Yes.
It just it is, and you are the sun. You are absolutely the sun.
And that's really what enables the purification to happen. There's no self that purifies itself. There's nothing that we really do. Um, it's it's just being that knowing presence in all of our lives, all of our activities.
Yes, yes. We have a few comments on the board. Patty Murphy says, please clarify again how and what forgiveness is defined as in ACIM. So, in A Course in Miracles, forgiveness is defined in this way. Forgiveness recognizes what I thought my brother did never occurred. So, forgiveness is a way of using words to describe or to change the old traditional terms of forgiveness into the truth of what, if you're using terms, the term of forgiveness recognizes this never occurred. This is only, and in Advaita, or the non-dual teaching, the direct path, is that as the sun, as you are the sky, the 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 clouds, as Rupert would say, just call the clouds a bill that came in the mail, or the clouds someone offended you, or call the clouds someone you're angry with, or something that you're worried about. Call any of those things clouds, and you are the sky. And those clouds come and go, and as you relax into and as the knowing of the self as the sky, or the knowing of the self as awareness of the clouds, they, if when you don't touch them, you just allow them to be what they are, they will dissolve into the nothingness that they arose from, which is always arising in front of and as a modulation of the experience of, or the awareness of that experience. And it's so fast. In my mind, if you're not using words, if you're just going into the experience of being and looking at the worry, noticing the worry, just watching it come up, don't try to touch it, don't talk about it. I mean, unless it just has unless it's holding you, unless you've invested your identity to it, and then you might need an intermediary, like you've seen Rupert in his webinars. Someone will be locked up, and they have one simple little conversation with Rupert. He brings them into the experience of awareness. They're looking at their problem from awareness, and it's gone.
Yes.
It's just
And
that.
so, yeah, and sometimes a problem is really becomes a problem for us because we imagine that someone has deliberately behaved badly towards us. We think, well, this is their fault, they shouldn't have done that. But if you actually look at what causes our own thoughts, we don't control our thoughts. And one of the things Rupert says, if you want to change your thoughts, you have first to change the universe. And it's because there's this whole interconnected web of everything that happens in the universe from way back, which will produce a particular thought and as a result a particular action in someone. So they are not responsible for what you perceive as the hurt that they have caused you.
Yeah,
They are simply not.
yeah,
It's just what has happened in the universe. As you say, it's just a cloud floating in the sky. And when you see it like that, sometimes when it has felt a little bit personal, then it really does make a difference. It dissolves some of your resentment and anger and so on.
yes, yes. Well, and one of the things I really love with regard to, there's a lot of practices in the Course in Miracles, and I love the Course. I read it every day, and I'm doing all the workbook lessons this year. as many of you know, I'm recording them in audio form so that people can read them and listen in their own experience of listening. And I love the way the course points you to understanding how the mind works. But I want to I want to say that I mostly love the way, once you've had the direct experience of awareness, of the knowing of your experience, and you have this visceral knowing of your being, then the Course, Ramana Maharshi, the Bhagavad Gita, all the teachings of the best sages, the Yogananda, Rupert, all of those things, they're just an enhancement to to really bringing excitement, bringing clarity, bringing words to an experience of really something that you've discovered that is wordless. You are, we are, consciousness is what God is. And as we have these broader, more open minded discoveries of the teachings of these great non dual teachings of all the different traditions, we're uh, able to put words of music, just put harmony and music, just like a symphony of to our experience in time and space. And time and space no longer becomes the dictator of how we experience time and space. We experience time and space from a place of total presence and peace, and joy fills our heart because we know what we are. We know that we are thyself. We are the experience that what we've always been looking for is what we are, the identity of the self.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been. What would you say is your most valuable part of this chapter, Jenny? What would you say is the most helpful takeaway?
I think it's recognizing that all I am, all everything is pure consciousness. Um, any experience is simply a modulation of that consciousness, and bringing that into everyday life, it produces happiness. And I think happiness is really the test of whether this teaching is working.
Yes, yes, yeah. I love the pointing of Rupert Spira. I feel that he is the greatest teacher of non-duality of our time. I really feel that he puts it into words in such a beautiful and articulate manner, and he's he describes it one way, and if you didn't get it that way, well, look at it from this way, and if you didn't get it this way, how about this? And he's just so clear. And I want to thank Rupert again for the way he shows up as a teacher. And I want to thank you, Jenny, for the way you show up as a teacher and a guest co-host on this show. And all of you guys that are here participating in the book club, thank you for being here. Happy New Year. I love you and I bless you. And next week, we're going to have Kimberly Cartwright back, and we're going to be sharing from chapter 10, that existence is identical to awareness. Existence is identical to awareness, and that is a really good chapter. All of them are really good. And if you're like me, the holidays are over. We had a great time. I was with family. I was in an RV out on the West Coast for a while with my oldest daughter and a couple of my grandkids. I've been traveling a bit. And I think we have a trip to Mexico coming up in a couple of weeks, and I'll be traveling a little more. But I've had a great break just to focus on other activities. And now I'm very happy to be back with you all in the study of the nature of consciousness. And Jenny, thank you for being with us on the show today.
It's been lovely to be with you all. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us. And I'll see you all next week for Chapter 10 with Kimberly Cartwright. Until then, have a beautiful week and a Happy New Year. Bye bye.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you.